I'm a pastor, an artist, an author, a scholar, and a conversation. Welcome to Chatfest with Kenneth. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chatfest with Kenneth. And for this episode, we are going to be addressing suicide. So, yes, I know it is a tough topic, but it has to be addressed. And here is my guest today. I'm going to let him introduce himself. Could you introduce yourself to viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Josh Anderson Sr. I'm the president and co-founder of JJ's Hello Foundation. We're a youth suicide prevention and mental health foundation that was created following the loss of our 12-year-old son, JJ, to suicide in 2016. So we felt like we had no answers at the time when we lost him. So we wanted to not only find the answers as to why he was depressed and took his life, but also do whatever we could to help other people at the same time. So that's where we are now.
So just in case people are wondering, did they really hear correctly? Yes, you heard correctly. His 12-year-old committed suicide. So, and I don't know how any parent can process that or even begin to understand that. So, looking back, now obviously now you've known a lot about you've been informed, you've been educated, but let's go back to how in the mind frame you were then. What did you think? Did you even have any idea that your son may have been depressed or even dealing with mental issues? Mental health?
At the time we had no idea. Obviously we've learned some subtle things now, things that we've learned researching and talking to other people and taking classes of signs that we should have possibly seen. But at the time, he was 3 weeks before his 13th birthday. So we were out planning his birthday, getting his friends list together, getting ready for that. So we had no idea that he was, depressed as depressed as he was, or even possibly considering suicide. It was never a thought that would have crossed our mind. He was one of our kids that we wouldn't have worried about. He was that, to himself, he was responsible. He was good in school. There were nothing that would have jumped out at us that said, oh, he's struggling, which is, why we started this foundation. So parents can see that it may not be the signs that you think that you need to see that are out there that your child could be struggling.
Okay, so I'm still focused on back then when you were not as informed as you are now. So back then, what would you say he was like an average son, an average 12-year-old?
Right.
Okay. So how did it unfold that you discovered he had?
Absolutely, yeah. So the day started like any normal Thursday. He went to school. We went to work. What we found out was, I guess, on his way home from school that day, I don't know if he was showing off or whatever he was doing, but he fell off his bike or he crashed into something on his bike and he fell off. And I guess the group of friends that he would normally come home with were with him, and they started laughing at him. And, normally to us, we would think, oh, it's just a joke. You fall off your bike, whatever, you shake it off and you move on. But when he came home, he was really upset and emotional. And I heard him, I was upstairs. I heard him throw his bike down in the garage when he got home. So I went down to check on him and I was like, JJ, what's going on? And he was like, don't talk to me. I don't want to talk right now, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, I gave him his space for a little bit. And then he was still upset. So I went up to him again later and I was like, JJ, talk to me, what's going on? And he was like, just leave me alone. So I was like, okay. So I sat on the couch with him for a little bit and I just sat there and, he was just not talking. He was kind of crying. He was upset. So later that day, we had a baseball meeting for our older son, who was a freshman in high school at the time. So it was his first year of baseball. So we had to go to a baseball meeting. And, now looking back, I wish we would have brought JJ with us, but we left him at home. He wasn't by himself. My mom and my grandma live with us, and they were there.
Okay.
And his younger sister and younger brother, who was 5 months old at the time, were there also. So he wasn't alone. So we went to the baseball meeting and we left him there. Obviously, looking back now, that was a mistake.
Mm-hmm. So you went to the meeting, and then, so I guess he had some alone time, and he,
Right.
so how was he discovered? Who discovered him?
So we went to the meeting. When we were at the meeting, we got a text message from one of his friends that asked, well, our older son did, and asked if he was with JJ. And we were like, no, we're at the meeting. We're not with him. So they started texting back and forth, and the girl he was texting at the time was like, he's saying something about he wants to die or he wants to take his life. So obviously at that point, we're like, whoa, what's going on? At first, looking back now, first we thought it was a joke, like, oh, he's just being dramatic. We never would have taken something like that serious. So we rushed home. When we got home, my wife went upstairs first and tried to open his door. His door was locked.
It's locked.
So she yelled down the stairs to get me. I ran up the stairs. The door was still locked, so I kicked down the door, and that's when he fell from the doorway.
Wow. Okay, so now fast forward to what you know now. What are you informed on now?
Right. So the stuff that we've learned is very little about actually how he was feeling at the time, but he did text the girl and say that it was school and stuff. We don't know what the stuff is. We can only assume that he put a lot of pressure on himself. He was taking honors classes. It was his choice to take the honors classes, but he was taking honors classes. So he was really busy in school. However, he got good grades. So grades weren't an issue. But I think just the pressure of all the classes that he had to keep up on. I mean, he was only in 7th grade. So we don't think about grades and pressure and that kind of stuff in 7th grade being a big deal. We think of high school and college. But he put a lot of pressure on himself to be the best as he could be in school and get the best grades possible. So we learned that. We learned about him falling off his bike and getting laughed at. But I mean, the only thing that we can look back on and say that we may have seen that we kind of ignored was he was getting more angry. And when I say angry, I don't mean like hitting people or lashing out like that, but just he was more grumpy, more emotional, more, leave me alone kind of thing. Everything's fine, just don't bother me kind of thing.
Okay.
And
so he was kind of isolating?
Yeah, I mean, isolating, yes, but no. I mean, he spent a lot more time in his room that we can see now. He spent more time playing computer games and video games. I mean, he was very active. He played soccer. He was very good at soccer. He played a lot of soccer. So it wasn't that he didn't do anything, but he definitely was starting to spend a little more time to himself and maybe self-isolating. But again, nothing that was drastic enough that we would have said, oh, get out of your room. You're spending all day in your room. But just subtle little changes to his demeanor and
subtle little changes.
Yeah.
I think I use that. I like that phrase. Subtle little changes. Just something that, you probably would just look at and not pay too much attention to it. But now in hindsight, like, maybe I should have paid attention to this.
Right. And that's what we talk to people about, because he didn't spend all of his time in his room. He didn't start getting bad grades. He didn't start doing drugs and things like that. I mean, there weren't any major signs.
So
the key
major traditional signs that we all say,
Traditional signs,
oh,
right,
this is what you would look for.
right,
It wasn't anything
right.
like that.
Right. And that's the kind of stuff that, growing up that I would have been looking for, or I was told were signs of teenage depression or suicide,
Mhm.
ideation. But in this
Exactly.
case, it was just those very subtle little changes that weren't normal for him
Hmm.
that we should have seen and said, hey, maybe we need to take him to talk to somebody, or, maybe we need to talk to his doctor or a counselor at school and see if they've noticed any changes, things like that.
So, um, and this was how long ago? When did this happen? How many years ago was this now?
This is 5 years ago this month.
Okay, 5 years ago. So, you obviously have done some processing of the grief and the loss because you can articulate and have this conversation.
Right.
So you've obviously done some processing of the loss.
Right.
We are unfortunately, we are in a pandemic where a lot of
Right.
people have experienced loss, very close people. And I've lost family members to COVID.
Oh,
So,
wow.
what would you say if there's, because sure, every loss is not like, oh, I've experienced loss, so I understand what you're going through. No, it's always different. But for someone who has experienced loss of a loved one, of someone so dear, you
Right.
are in a position to speak to people going through loss. What would you say to someone who has experienced loss and is still in that zone?
I mean, the first thing I would say is that you definitely need to take care of yourself. One of the things that I would say that we did that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to other people is, for our family, we put a lot of focus right into this foundation.
Mm-hmm.
But by doing so, we also miss that time to grieve and to come to some realizations ourselves and to help ourselves. So I would have definitely, looking back now, although I don't regret anything that we've done with this
Uh-huh.
foundation, I would definitely recommend people take more time. The good thing is me and my wife both had a lot of time off that we were able to take from work. Our work was very understanding. Some people don't get that opportunity.
True.
So if you do have time off from work or have that time, definitely take it. Take all the time that you need. The other thing that I would say for people that are feeling this kind of loss is to definitely let other people help you.
Okay.
We had a lot of family support and friends that offered to make meals, take our other kids to events and things. So definitely take advantage of the friends and family that you have. For those people that don't have friends and family that are helpful, if you're in church, take advantage of the people in your church.
Mm-hmm.
If you work for somebody and people at work want to help you, take advantage of people at your work. But don't push other people away, because although they may not understand your grief, most of the time they definitely have your best interest in mind and
Mm-hmm.
want to help you, even though they may not know how to say it. So
Okay.
take advantage of that.
Well,
And then I would also say that if there's any sort of groups out there,
okay.
grief groups or things like that, research that information, find those groups, find the groups that are feeling the same loss as you. So if you've lost somebody to suicide, find a suicide survivors group. That's one of the things that we did. Find those groups that you can go to, because those people know exactly how you're feeling. And being around other people that have lost the same way that you did, because suicide's a different kind of loss.
Yes,
Losing somebody to COVID's a different kind of loss.
that's true.
Losing somebody to cancer
Mm-hmm.
or something like that is a different kind of loss. Find people that have lost somebody the same way that you did, because when you are around those people, you don't feel alone.
Okay.
And that's very important, to not feel alone when you're grieving.
Okay. So, and this, have to ask this. Losing a child to suicide, losing an adult to suicide is uncomfortable enough to talk about.
Right.
And then now losing a child is almost like, even though people care and they want to reach out, but it's almost like there's a fear or a dread, like I don't know what to say. I might say the wrong thing. I
Right.
might say the wrong thing and trigger this person to break down and cry. And so I want to skirt around it. Oh, I want to deny it. I just want to be. So sometimes the easiest way is people avoid. They just try to comfort from a distance because I don't know what to say if
Right.
I'm there. And I didn't lose this person, but I'm uncomfortable. So I can only imagine this person that lost uh, this member. I can only imagine how they feel. So the best thing I can do is just stay from afar. And so some people feel that way. How you looking from the side of having experienced it, how would you tell us who are on the other side trying to reach out but are so uncomfortable? How should we?
Yeah, I would definitely encourage those people to still, come around the person that's lost somebody. And one of the things that people always think is that we don't want to talk about them. And in reality, if you have a story or if, a situation when you were around that person, bring that person up. I like it when people talk about our son. We heard so many stories about how he helped people we didn't even know about, or
Wow.
we had friends that came up to us and saw him, riding his bike to school every day. And they would say, I stood in my window, and when he rode by on his bike, he would always wave at me, just things like that. And a lot of people's impressions is, well, I'm not going to say anything about them because it's just going to make them upset or it's going to make them cry. But in reality, just hearing that our loved one existed,
Mm-hmm.
hearing that my son was here is far
Mm-hmm.
more important to me. Knowing that he was somebody or that he did something to touch you. I'm getting a little emotional talking about it now, but that kind of stuff means so much more to me than just trying to avoid the situation.
Okay. Um, so I am a suicide attempt survivor.
Mm-hmm.
Did it 3 times. The last two, I was in a coma and almost. And so I understand it from the side of um, this person going through.
Right.
And I know that um, trying to reach out, I know because I can see both sides now,
Right.
and trying to cry for help, cry out for help. Even though I wanted help and I thought I was crying out for help, but the
Right.
other person was not, didn't see it that I was crying out for help.
Right.
They didn't understand that, okay, yes, they might have thought that when I lashed out, I was angry,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't angry. I was actually crying out for help. But it was the way I was expressing it, the language I was using was
Mm-hmm.
not the language someone who isn't suffering will be able
Right.
to receive and process.
Right.
So, my question to you is when you lost him, were you concerned about your other the siblings?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and one of the things that we've actually had some trouble with well, she's 12 now, but she was 8 at the time. Having suicidal feelings now because of the loss of her brother and the fact that she was scared to turn 12 because he was 12 when he took his life.
Ah,
So, but one of the things is it's hard because I feel like we watch them and we cradle them a little more than we should sometimes.
okay.
Um, and that's hard. It's a hard balance to make because we are afraid for their
Mm-hmm.
mental health, but at the same time, we understand now that what kind of help to get them,
Mm-hmm.
um, what kind of situations to put them in, what kind of stuff to watch out for. And we've learned a lot of those little subtle signs. We have to watch out for anger, we have to watch out for isolation, we have to watch out for, you know, grades dropping, we have to watch out for their sleeping and eating habits, and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. But it's hard because I don't want them to feel like we're hovering over them all the time.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, we have to have that mindset that anything could
True.
happen at any time because we have lost someone.
Okay. True. And I want to segue to the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So the foundation is a celebration of his life.
Right.
it's a celebration of his life and using his life to influence and inspire people who could be in similar situations that he went through. So tell us more about the foundation and how you guys are reaching out.
Yeah, absolutely. So once we started the foundation, the first steps were creating a website so we could get as much information about youth suicide, youth mental health, the differences between normal teen behavior and suicidal teen behavior. Once we did that, then we established relationships with different community partners, NAMI, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, just so we could be involved in as much mental health and suicide prevention things as possible locally.
Uh-huh.
Since then we've started a podcast where we
Okay.
provide a lot of information to parents that may not want to surf on the internet to find it, but want to listen to some information. And we do talking events. Last year we talked at Kaiser hospitals. We talked to the doctors there. They were very helpful with our son when he was passing. So we wanted to give back to them, let them know from the family's perspective, everything that we went through. We've talked at the local college to the counselors, the potential school counselors, about things that they need to be looking for
Okay.
in relation to our son. Because again, the hardest thing is our son wasn't somebody that you would think that was suicidal. So if we can give any insight to anybody on the other things to look for,
Sure.
it's not the kid wearing all black. It's not the kid whose grades are dropping. It's the kid that, is involved in school, involved in sports, has a girlfriend, has friends,
How's
that
that
kid
perfect? That perfect front.
Right. I mean, he would walk into a room and make everybody smile. And he was still the one that was struggling somewhere
Struggling
inside
inside.
from something. So, we do a lot of that kind of stuff. We are involved in the walks that they do every year. I'm just getting as much information out to as many people, parents, teachers, kids as possible, because if we can save one life through his name, or his, what we call his mission now, because one of the things is we came up with say hello, save a life. Because the reality is, if somebody's depressed and you just acknowledge that person one day, you could be turning their entire day around.
That is absolutely true.
And, so just acknowledging somebody that you see on the street, acknowledging your friend who's even appears to be happy, and just saying, hey, I really appreciate you. You mean a lot to me. The smallest little things you do mean a lot to me. That could save somebody's life. So just to get as much information out to as many people as possible, and just try to save as many lives as possible, whether it's youth or adult. I mean, it doesn't matter to us.
That is true. That is true. So you did mention a podcast. So I will put the information for the podcast in the description of this video. Now, so what is the podcast about?
So it's called the Say Hello, Save a Life podcast. And right now, it's basically just me providing information about youth mental health, providing information about what we can do for our kids right now during the pandemic, because, a lot of them are not able to be in school or be with their friends. Providing information, about what signs to look for, and, honestly, just how to help somebody who, even if you have that slightest idea, might be depressed, what you can do to help them. So right now, that's what it is. I mean, obviously, we would like to expand. We have some interviews that we're going to be doing with some other people in the community. We have a partner foundation that we're going to talk to that's in Illinois, David J. Cobb Foundation. So that we're going to talk to them about what they're doing in their area and things like that. But just getting information out in as many different ways as possible is our goal at this point.
And as a foundation, do you guys accept donations too?
Yeah, absolutely. We accept donations. We accept any monetary donation somebody wants to make, even the smallest amount. And then certain times during the year, mostly right now, it's going to be local people, but we accept money for school supplies. We donate backpacks every year to schools.
And I'll put that information in this video as well.
Right. So obviously this year it's a little bit different because kids are at home, but when normally they're in school, we provide for low-income families donations.
Okay. So I'm coming back to COVID again. And I think I was watching the news and I was looking at seeing a program about the stats on mental health, that because there's a whole lot of isolation that
Right.
has to go on, um, people are having to, the escapism that people would have used to escape and
Right.
look for a distraction or medication, or to medicate the mental health issue they're dealing with. It's almost like, oh, it's not readily as available as it would have been. So now there's a whole lot of, you can't repress, you can't suppress it, how you have to deal with it. So my question to you is, for someone who is in the throes of it, or is not even aware that they are in the throes of it, they just know that, oh, I feel down, I just feel and I'm I just want to stay by myself, and I'm not gonna kill myself, but I'm thinking about it, but I'm not gonna do it. So they haven't really accepted where they are, but
Right.
they are in possibly in the zone. What
Right.
would you say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, those are the ones that are going to be the hardest people because they haven't come to the understanding that they may be depressed. So they may not even understand, hey, I'm feeling down, but I don't know what that means, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, the first thing I would say to them is, even if you have the slightest idea that you may be down, you need to reach out to somebody. It doesn't matter who that somebody is. Obviously, if it's a kid, you'd want them to reach out to their parent first. Well, most kids aren't going to talk to their parents.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to go to a friend, or they're going to go to a coach if they, still have school, or they're going to go to a teacher. But just to reach out to somebody. If you're not, a student that's in school or something, just reach out to a friend. Um, talk to a counselor if you have a counselor available, if it's school or if it's outside of school. If you're in church, talk to a pastor, talk to somebody at your church. Because just giving the idea that you may be feeling down, even if you don't know that that's exactly what you're feeling, then you have somebody, then you have a partner, you have somebody that's on your side.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it's a trusted person,
Hopefully it's a
that's
trusted
going to be
person.
able to follow that. Yeah, that's going to be able to follow up with you, because you don't want to talk to just a random person who's just going to say, they're not depressed, or, they'll be fine, or just blows it off. You want to talk to a trusted person. And then I would say, for the kids out there, even if you talk to your friends about that. So if your friend is talking to you and they seem upset, don't be the friend that says, that they're the one that's going to help them, because most of the time you don't have the ability to do so.
All the resources.
You don't want to lose your friend forever. So
Mm.
talk to somebody else, because even if you think, and one of the things that we learned from the girl that he was talking to is she was afraid that he was going to be upset with her if she told somebody. Don't worry about them being upset with you for a short period of time or a long period of time. Worry about the fact that if you don't say something, they may be gone forever.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would say to that person that there's nothing wrong with you,
Mm-hmm.
that depression is normal. Everybody gets depressed. I've been depressed. Even the most popular, most celebrated people in the world have been
Get
depressed at some
depressed.
point.
That's true.
So there's nothing wrong with you being depressed, and there is help for you out there. There's help through school. The schools have help. There's help through doctors have help. There's help through medications.
And I
There's
even
help.
noticed there's help online now,
Right,
anonymously. So
right.
if for people who are maybe older than kids, and maybe
Right.
young teenagers or young adults or even
Adults, right.
adults, you can
Right.
anonymously get help online. There
Oh, yeah.
is a person on the other end that's ready to
Yes.
talk with you and give you information if you just
Absolutely.
Google.
Yep, absolutely. There's phone lines that you can call. There's text lines
And we'll
that you
put
can
that
just
information in
text.
this video too as well.
Right. Yeah, there's just text lines that you can text through your phone. There's even chat lines on the computer. So
That
you
is
can find,
absolutely true.
ways to just chat on the computer. And ultimately, it's once you start getting those feelings out, you're going to start feeling better. I mean, that's the one thing that people don't understand is you hold all of that in and you
Mhm.
feel worse. Once you start getting that information out, you're going to start feeling better.
And it is not weakness to
Right.
look for help,
Right.
because there's still that mindset in some people like, oh, if I admit that I'm depressed, it means I'm weak. I have to be strong, so I can't be weak. Being vulnerable is a sign of weakness. It's not weakness. Weakness is actually admitting you need help is strength.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, admitting that you need help, admitting that you have a problem is a sign of strength, and people need to understand that it needs to be talked about more.
Last question for you. Time flies so quickly. Last question for you. Actually, I don't know if it's a question. I want you to give us one or two memories of your son.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a year before, so in 2015, a year before he took his life, we had the opportunity to go as a family to Disneyland. And I just remember how excited he was, and the fact that, he wanted to stay up all night. He wanted to go on every ride that we could all night. And I just, one of my favorite memories with him, unfortunately it was towards the end, but was the fact that, he was so excited, and we spent so much time as a family there, and we have some really good pictures. And it's hard to look back on those pictures sometimes, but just knowing how happy he was at that time, although it's sad because clearly he probably was still struggling then. But we had a lot of good times then. And then I would have to say, after he passed away, we heard a memory. We had a neighbor down the street who was moving in, and we had no idea at the time, but I guess he helped this neighbor move her stuff into her house. She was a single mom. And I guess he was out one day and was helping move her in, and came home and didn't tell us anything, didn't say anything to us.
Wow.
And it's just, when we hear stories like that, we just know, how special he was, and how much he wanted to help other people. And, that's why we focus so much of our time now on helping other people and helping our kids, because he was that person. He was that person that he wouldn't leave a room until you were smiling.
Wow.
And even though he was struggling so much inside, that's what we live forward for.
Thank you very much for sharing the beautiful memory of your son with us, and the legacy of his life that you're carrying on, and the lives that he's affecting, and hopefully the people who are watching that are being informed and empowered to seek help if they are struggling. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Okay. And that was my conversation with him. It's a hard thing to lose a loved one that way, and especially a child. But it's a very noble thing to celebrate his life, to celebrate the memory of him. It's a very commendable thing. And so I would, as many who are watching, please see the links, support the foundation, reach out if you have any questions, any advice, suggestions that you might need from him. And of course, like, subscribe, comment. Wow, that was wow. Definitely, I hope I'm definitely wow. Anyway, thank you for watching this show, and you have a wonderful evening.